Everyone thinks they know what strength looks like. They picture the loudest voice in the room, the man who never backs down from a fight, the one stacking up big wins with unshakable confidence. Strength is usually painted as dominance, control, and certainty, the kind of force you can see from miles away. But here's the strange part: some people grow stronger in ways that don't look like strength at all. Their power doesn't roar, it whispers. It shows up in quiet choices, hidden habits, and moments that, from the outside, don't look impressive at all. In fact, they can look awkward, unusual, even weak. That's what makes it so easy to overlook. While everyone else is busy chasing the flashy, obvious signs of power, Sigma males are busy building something different, something deeper. Their strength grows underground, like roots spreading unseen beneath the surface. And because it doesn't scream for attention, most people miss it entirely. But if you slow down, if you watch closely, you'll notice something strange. These men rarely crumble when the world gets heavy. They bend, but they don't break. They carry storms in silence and walk out the other side steadier than before. And once you begin to notice how they do it, you realize why nothing seems to shake them. Their habits look weird, even counterintuitive, but hidden inside those odd patterns is a kind of resilience most people will never understand. Here are 7 unusual ways Sigma males build emotional strength, habits that slip under the radar, yet explain why they stay calm and grounded when others fall apart. Number 1. Sit with pain instead of running from it. Most people treat pain like it's poison. The second it shows up, they'll do anything to drown it out. Some bury themselves in endless work, staying so busy they never have a second to feel. Others run to noise, social media scrolling, loud music, constant distractions, anything to keep the silence away. Some numb themselves with addictions, chasing temporary highs to avoid the crash. Anything but facing what actually hurts. And on the surface, that seems normal. Who would willingly sit with heartbreak, disappointment, rejection, or the crushing weight of failure? Avoidance feels natural, even smart. But here's where things take a strange turn. While most people are running from their wounds, some don't. Some choose to sit in the middle of the fire and let it burn. More often than not, Sigma males fall into this category, not because they seek suffering, but because life left them no other choice. From a young age, they've had to handle things alone. No hand-holding. No safety nets. No one to clean up the mess when life fell apart. When pain came knocking, there was no escape route. The only option was to face it head-on. And that repeated exposure reshapes a person. Pain becomes less of a monster and more of a teacher. Sigmas discover something most people never learn: pain doesn't last forever. It surges like a storm, it crashes, it rattles your bones, it drowns you in waves of despair, and then, eventually, it passes. What lingers afterward isn't just the scar. It's the strength that scar represents. Each time they endure, they come out a little tougher, a little clearer, a little less afraid of the next wave. Where others crumble under pressure, Sigma males develop endurance that feels almost unshakable. That's why they don't break down as easily when life gets rough. They've already carried more than they were supposed to. They've already stood in the fire when most people would have run. And after years of that silent training, storms no longer scare them. They don't destroy them. They shape them. Number 2, treat silence like a weapon, not a weakness. There's something unusual about silence. Most people treat it like an emergency. A pause in conversation feels like failure. A quiet room feels unsettling, almost wrong. When there's no noise to hide behind, people panic. That instinct isn't random, it's what psychologists call social noise anxiety. Humans are wired to fear judgment, and silence creates space for that fear to echo. That's why most people can't sit with stillness without scrambling for a distraction, a phone to scroll, a joke to fill the gap, an excuse to break the tension. But Sigma men don't flinch the same way. For them, silence was never something to escape, it was the background of their life. Growing up more inward-facing, they weren't always surrounded by chatter, validation, or constant reassurance. They had to learn to be comfortable with their own company, with their own thoughts. Over time, that shaped them to view quiet not as emptiness, but as natural, even useful. And then something interesting happens: they notice how silence exposes people. In those pauses, others begin to unravel. They over-explain themselves. They reveal secrets they didn't plan to share. They expose insecurities they were trying to hide. Silence, in the hands of a Sigma, becomes less of an absence and more of a spotlight. It reveals what noise usually covers. From a psychological angle, this comes down to 2 traits: high introspection and low dependence on external approval. Sigma men don't need constant feedback to feel secure. They don't tie their worth to filling space or keeping others entertained. Because of that, they can sit in silence without their self-image cracking. Ironically, this calm unnerves others. To them, the silence becomes louder than words. It feels like the Sigma sees through them, even when he says nothing. What makes this powerful isn't manipulation or some mysterious aura, it's restraint. Sigma males let silence do the heavy lifting. They let it draw truth out of people, while keeping themselves protected and unreadable. That's why, when everything else around them gets loud and messy, their quiet presence often carries the most weight. Silence in their hands isn't weakness, it's a weapon. Number 3, turn failure into your training ground. Failure is one of the greatest fears most people carry, not because of the event itself, but because of the shadow it leaves behind. It's rarely the mistake that crushes them, it's the aftermath. The whispers of judgment, the sting of embarrassment, the nagging suspicion that maybe they're not enough. That's why many people tiptoe through life, choosing the safest roads possible. They avoid risks not because they don't want growth, but because they can't stomach what happens if they fall short. Sigma males walk a different path. Not because they are immune to fear, but because life never gave them the option to avoid it. Unlike those who had constant safety nets, parents to fix the mess, friends to soften the blow, communities to shield their pride, Sigmas often grew up in environments where failure was raw, unfiltered, and theirs alone to carry. They couldn't escape it. They had to face it, absorb it, and rebuild themselves again and again. This repeated collision with failure forges a new relationship with it. Where most people see failure as a verdict, Sigmas start to see it as feedback. It becomes less of a mirror reflecting their worth and more of a map pointing to what needs refining. Psychologically, this aligns with high self-reliance and analytical thinking, traits that push them to dissect setbacks instead of drowning in shame. Yes, the sting still hurts. The disappointment is real. But instead of letting it spiral into self-doubt, Sigma males metabolize that pain into fuel. They learn patterns, recognize blind spots, and carry those lessons into the next round. In a way, failure becomes their training ground, a forge where resilience is hammered into their character. This mindset explains why Sigmas rarely collapse under pressure the way others do. Where one failure might convince another man to quit, the Sigma interprets it as progress, proof that he is still in motion, still sharpening his edge. And that subtle shift creates a long-term strength most people never reach, because they've spent their whole lives running from the very thing that was supposed to make them stronger. Number 4, let go of needing to be understood. One of life's most painful truths is this: no matter who you are or what you do, people will misunderstand you. They will judge you through half-glimpses and fragments of your story. They will project their insecurities, their assumptions, and their fears onto you, and then act like they've seen your whole soul. For most people, this is unbearable. They spend years explaining themselves, trying to correct the record, desperate to convince others that they are not who the world says they are. They chase approval, clarification, validation, burning endless energy in the attempt to be seen accurately. But the cruel reality is this: no matter how much you explain, someone will still twist your story. Someone will still misunderstand. Sigma males learn this truth earlier than most. Often alienated, often misread, they realize that fighting to be understood is a war with no finish line. The more you resist the misunderstanding, the more tangled in it you become. At some point, the only way forward is surrender, not to the judgment, but to the fact that it doesn't matter. Psychologists describe this as internal framing, the ability to process the world through your own logic before allowing it to touch your emotions. For the Sigma, this is second nature. Misunderstanding doesn't register as a wound. It registers as irrelevant noise. If someone gets it wrong, that's on them, not on him. His sense of self doesn't depend on external interpretation. Ironically, this detachment becomes a hidden source of strength. When you no longer need to be understood, you become unshakable. No rumor, no slander, no false impression has the power to destabilize you. And here's the paradox: by letting go of the need to prove yourself, you end up radiating the kind of calm authority that makes people want to understand you even more. For Sigma males, letting go of the need to be understood isn't rebellion. It isn't arrogance. It's survival. And in time, survival hardens into clarity. Clarity into strength. And that strength is untouchable, because no opinion can rewrite it. Number 5, build a life bigger than yourself. One of the quickest ways to feel fragile in life is to make everything about you. When your entire identity is tied to personal wins, every failure feels catastrophic. Every rejection cuts deeper. Every mistake becomes proof that you're not enough. And when life inevitably punches harder than you expect, the ego-centered man shatters, because his entire worth was built on fragile ground. That self-centered frame magnifies every blow until even small setbacks feel overwhelming. A missed opportunity becomes humiliation. A single harsh word feels like an attack on the core of your being. Living this way is like walking through life with no armor. Every strike goes straight to the heart. Sigma men avoid this trap by building their lives on something larger than their own ego. They deliberately orient their existence toward a mission that transcends self-interest. Sometimes that mission is a cause, an idea they quietly work for. Sometimes it's a craft, an art form, a discipline, a skill that demands mastery. Other times, it's people they silently protect, provide for, or inspire without needing recognition. Whatever the outlet, it gives their struggles context. Hard days aren't just about me suffering. They're about me carrying weight so the bigger vision doesn't collapse. Psychiatrist Viktor Frankl, in Man's Search for Meaning, captured this truth under conditions most people cannot imagine, the Nazi concentration camps. He noticed that prisoners who focused only on their suffering were far more likely to collapse under despair. But those who held on to a vision, reuniting with loved ones, continuing unfinished work, or believing their pain still served a greater purpose, often endured longer, even when their bodies were breaking. Meaning didn't erase suffering, but it transformed it into a burden worth bearing. For Sigma males, this isn't about preaching or pretending to be noble. It's a survival strategy. Purpose distributes the weight. When you're connected to something greater than yourself, your pain no longer exists in isolation. It becomes fuel. It becomes proof that your struggle has a reason. And that reason, whatever form it takes, is what keeps them moving when others collapse. That's why their strength doesn't feel brittle or forced. It isn't tied to applause, validation, or trophies. It comes from knowing their life isn't just a scoreboard of personal wins and losses. Their anchor is deeper, rooted in meaning, not ego. And when life throws its hardest punches, that anchor is what keeps them standing when everyone else falls. Number 6, become comfortable with uncertainty. Most people crave control. They want solid plans, clear answers, and guarantees about how life will unfold. The unknown makes them restless, even panicked, because it strips away the illusion of safety. That's why so many cling to rigid routines, social approval, financial security, or even controlling relationships. These attachments aren't just habits, they're shields against the anxiety of unpredictability. But Sigmas don't chase safety in the traditional sense. They learn early that control is always temporary. No matter how carefully you plan, life will break the script. So instead of fighting uncertainty, they embrace it. They learn to walk with the unknown like it's a permanent companion. And that gives them a strange edge. Where most people freeze or crumble when the ground shifts, Sigmas adapt. Their calm in chaos doesn't come from life being easy, it comes from conditioning themselves to function without guarantees. Here's the psychology behind it. Sigma males tend to operate with high levels of cognitive flexibility, the mental ability to shift perspectives when reality doesn't match expectations. While rigid thinkers waste time fighting against what shouldn't be happening, flexible thinkers quickly pivot to asking, what now? This adaptability rewires their relationship with uncertainty. The unknown stops being an enemy and becomes a landscape of hidden options. Each collapse opens a new path. Each disruption is not the end of the story, but the beginning of a different one. Make no mistake, uncertainty still stings. It still produces stress, just like it does for everyone else. But Sigmas use that stress differently. Instead of letting it paralyze them, they use it to heighten their awareness. Psychologists call this stress inoculation, exposure to stress in repeated doses until the nervous system learns to handle it without shutting down. That's why Sigma men often appear strangely steady when others fall apart. They aren't fearless. They aren't unaffected. They've simply trained themselves to accept that unpredictability is the rule, not the exception. And once you stop fighting reality, you become nearly impossible to break. Number 7, stop trying to be good at everything. Modern life pushes a dangerous illusion that strength means being endlessly capable. You're expected to excel at work, maintain perfect relationships, keep a flawless body, stay socially relevant, and juggle dozens of roles without dropping the ball. The message is clear: if you can't do it all, you're somehow falling behind. On the outside, people who manage to keep up look like they've mastered life. They're constantly busy, constantly achieving, and constantly showing they can handle whatever comes their way. But inside, most of them are quietly collapsing. The pressure of performing in every area drains their energy, and eventually, the cracks begin to show. Burnout, anxiety, and a lingering sense of never being enough are the hidden costs of trying to be good at everything. Sigma males refuse to play this game. Not because they're immune to pressure, but because they've learned through experience that scattering your energy across endless tasks doesn't build strength, it destroys it. While many chase approval by saying yes to every demand, Sigmas deliberately choose the opposite. They narrow their focus. They'd rather be sharp in a handful of areas than mediocre in all of them. At first, this selective approach can make them appear less capable. They may not jump at every opportunity, they may ignore trends, and they may openly admit, "I don't care about that." To the outside world, it can seem like they're missing out. But the truth is, they're conserving energy for the battles that matter most to them. Psychologists describe this mindset as selective focus, a mental skill where attention is filtered so that only the most meaningful goals receive deep investment. Instead of chasing everything, Sigma males lock onto what aligns with their values and let the rest fade into the background. This not only protects them from burnout but also allows them to reach levels of mastery that scattered thinkers never achieve. Importantly, this doesn't mean they ignore their weaknesses. The difference is, they don't measure their worth by them. They don't collapse under the idea that they're not good at everything because they never bought into that illusion in the first place. Their self-esteem comes from depth, not breadth. And here's the paradox: what looks like limitation from the outside is actually strategy. By saying no to most things, they say a powerful yes to what truly matters. They build strength where it actually counts. When life tests people, it's not the well-rounded generalist who holds steady, it's the person who built solid ground under a few critical pillars. Sigma males understand this instinctively. That's why their strength doesn't spread thin across endless tasks, it's condensed, concentrated, and unshakable where it needs to be. Final thoughts. In a world obsessed with appearing capable in every direction, the Sigma male's refusal to chase perfection is a quiet form of rebellion. He doesn't waste himself trying to master everything, because he knows depth matters more than surface. While others exhaust themselves keeping every plate spinning, he builds strength in the few areas that truly matter, areas that can withstand storms when they come. What looks like limitation is, in reality, freedom. By narrowing his focus, he preserves his energy, protects his mind, and sharpens his abilities where they'll have the most impact. And when life inevitably tests him, he doesn't crumble under the weight of scattered effort. Instead, he stands firmly on the ground he's chosen to strengthen. That's the lesson here: you don't need to be good at everything. You need to be unshakable at the things that matter most. And once you realize that, the endless pressure to perform in every direction no longer controls you.